By now, you're probably wondering, how exactly did a guy like Chiron end up as the personal trainer, life coach, doctor, and possibly even therapist to half the Greek pantheon? It wasn't just luck. It was reputation. Word spread fast when your students kept not dying in heroic quests. As soon as someone had a kid with divine DNA and anger management issues. Guess where they dropped them off? Right, Chiron's cave, which, by the way, wasn't some dingy hobbit hole. This was Mount Pelion, high in Thessaly. Picture a spacious cave with a panoramic view of the Aegean, the scent of mountain herbs in the air, lyres strumming softly in the distance. And inside, Chiron, the world's most patient centaur, handcrafting future legends. Let's talk about one of his star pupils, Asclepius, the future god of medicine. Chiron taught him everything he knew about healing: herbs, surgery, diagnosis, you name it. Some myths say Asclepius got so good, he could literally bring the dead back to life. Which, you guessed it, annoyed Zeus. Immortality isn't exactly good for the economy of death, so Zeus zapped him with a thunderbolt. Classic, but it's Chiron's influence that lives on. To this day, the symbol of modern medicine, the staff with the serpent wrapped around it, is often linked to Asclepius. And by extension, you got it, Chiron. He's the mythological grandfather of every doctor you've ever met. Then there's Achilles. You know, the guy with the famously flawed heel and a reputation for rage-fueled glory. But long before the siege of Troy, he was just a messy-haired kid left in Chiron's care by his mother, Thetis, who was understandably worried that her son might grow up too mortal for his own good. Under Chiron's guidance, Achilles didn't just learn to fight. He learned restraint. Well, sort of. Chiron reportedly tried to teach him music, poetry, and philosophy to balance out the whole murder machine vibe. And while Achilles might not have written any sonnets, he did become known for his cleverness as much as his combat skills. A little bit of Chiron rubbed off after all. Another familiar name? Jason. Before leading the Argonauts on their Golden Fleece road trip, Jason was raised by Chiron too. In some versions, Chiron acts as Jason's surrogate father, raising him in secret after his royal family is overthrown. Imagine bedtime stories laced with survival tips and weekly lessons in diplomacy, navigation, and how not to get turned into a tree by a jealous god. Now here's a fun tidbit. Ancient Greek parents were known to name their children after heroes Chiron had mentored. Talk about a prestigious alumni network. There's even debate among scholars whether real historical figures adopted student of Chiron as a kind of bragging right. The way some people name-drop Ivy League schools today, historians still argue whether Chiron was a real figure woven into myth, a representation of an actual tradition of noble tutors in Thessaly, or a purely literary invention. Whatever the case, the Greeks clearly saw in him the ideal of the paidutes, the archetype of the perfect mentor, guide, and moral compass. The contrast with the rest of the centaur population couldn't be more extreme. While his cousins crashed weddings and chased nymphs, Chiron was writing ancient syllabi. This distinction likely reflects Greek concerns with nature versus nurture, civilization versus savagery, recurring themes in their worldview. And in the center of that ideological storm stood Chiron, four-legged and wise, living proof that being part animal didn't mean you had to act like one. Next time you picture a centaur, skip the wine barrel and imagine instead a soft-spoken teacher gently guiding a reckless demigod through archery practice, or sitting beneath the stars explaining how. Constellations tell stories too, because here's the real magic. Chiron didn't become a hero by slaying monsters. He became one by raising them into something better. By now, Chiron's curriculum is overflowing. Archery, ethics, astronomy, healing, how to deal with clingy gods, all the essentials. But beneath it all, there's something deeper happening. Something most of his pupils don't see until they're far from his cave, facing the edge of a blade or the weight of destiny. Chiron isn't just teaching skills. He's teaching choices. And that's where the real myth lies. In what you decide to do with the knowledge you're given. Let's rewind a moment to that lesser-known student of his. Heracles, the muscle-bound hero with a club the size of a small tree and a tendency to accidentally destroy things. Relationships, cities, dinner parties. You'd think someone like that would be beyond teaching, but even Heracles needed guidance. And for a time, he found it in Chiron. Their story, though, ends in tragedy. During a fight between Heracles and some wild centaurs. Long story short, someone opened the wine and things escalated. Heracles accidentally shoots Chiron with one of his own poisoned arrows. The same poison Heracles had smeared on his weapons from the Lernaean Hydra's blood. Immortal Chiron? Now stuck with a wound that will never heal. And here's the heartbreaking irony. Chiron, healer of all, can't heal himself. You feel that, don't you? That soft thud of cosmic unfairness. The one teacher who gave his life to soothe others' pain is left in agony, undone by the very violence he tried to steer his pupils away from. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth was a later addition meant to give Chiron a Christ-like arc, suffering for the sins of his children, or whether it's a reflection of the ancient idea that wisdom must come with sacrifice. After all, what's more tragic than the wise healer struck down by the reckless brute he tried to civilize? In some versions, Chiron retreats to his cave, bearing his pain in silence, still offering guidance even as the wound festers. It's only after years, or what feels like centuries, of enduring this torment that he makes his final act, trading his immortality for Prometheus's freedom. Prometheus, that fire thief who defied Zeus to bring light to humanity, had been chained to a rock and tortured for eternity. And Chiron, sweet, stubborn Chiron, decides he's had enough of his own endless pain. He offers to die so that Prometheus can live. Imagine that. Swapping out your eternal existence because you'd rather end your pain than let someone else suffer longer. That's not just a sacrifice. That's empathy carved into legend, Zeus agrees. And for once, the king of gods shows a flicker of grace. Chiron's soul is released. His suffering ends. But death, in mythology, isn't always disappearance. Chiron is rewarded with a place among the stars. The constellation Centaurus, still visible in the southern sky, becomes his resting form. Look up on a clear night, and there he is, half man, half horse, bow drawn, not in violence, but in calm readiness. Not a beast, not a god, something in between. And here's a quirky angle scholars love to debate. Was placing Chiron in the stars a kind of ancient hall of fame? Or was it more about showing that true wisdom transcends mortality? Some argue the Greeks saw constellations as eternal teachers, silently watching over those below. You start to realize that Chiron's story isn't just a myth, it's a blueprint of what it means to carry wisdom without ego, to teach without demanding fame, to suffer without bitterness. His life forms the spine of countless others, the quiet thread that stitches the fabric of heroism together. And maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder to you too, that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it teaches. You're walking now along the starlit ridges of Mount Pelion, imagining the echo of Chiron's hooves where the rocks have long since stilled. The cave is quiet, empty, perhaps, but not abandoned. Even without him there, the place hums with memory. The smell of time and burnt laurel, the soft whisper of old scrolls, maybe a forgotten harp string still vibrating in the wind. Chiron might be gone, but the space he occupied? Very much alive. That's the thing about legendary teachers. Their lessons don't vanish. They echo, passed from student to student, woven into stories that get told around fires and through time. And Chiron's students? Let's just say they weren't exactly writing poetry in the back of the class. They changed the world. Take Achilles, for instance. Hot-tempered, proud, and glorious, yes, but also philosophical, strategic, and deeply loyal. Not the kind of hero you'd expect from someone raised on battlefield rage alone. That quiet moment in the Iliad when he's mourning Patroclus, refusing food, contemplating his own mortality? That's Chiron's voice in there. The teacher who said, bravery isn't just how you fight, it's why. Then there's Asclepius, whose healing touch was so potent the gods had to intervene. You start to see the thread. Chiron didn't raise warriors, he raised legacies. Each one of his pupils went on to shape their own myths, their own cities, even their own cults. Chiron, by contrast, didn't found anything. No temples, no bloody trophies. Just heroes. Historians still argue whether this quiet legacy was intentional, a narrative choice to make Chiron a literary contrast to the flashier gods, or whether it reflects something deeper in Greek thought, the value of wisdom without ambition, power without conquest. It's one of those moments where myth and philosophy hold hands and stroll together through the fog. And let's not forget Jason, who led the Argonauts with a calm Chiron would have approved of. Well, until Medea came into the picture and things got complicated. But hey, every student rebels a little. Chiron probably saw it coming, probably sighed, shook his bearded horse head, and muttered something like, should have spent more time on the Don't Marry Angry Sorceresses module. One quirky bit. Later poets and scholars in ancient Greece started attributing all kinds of random inventions to Chiron. Musical scales, types of lyres, even the discovery of botany. If someone didn't know where an idea came from, they'd just slap, probably Chiron, on it like a mythological post-it note. The man became a catch-all for wisdom, which, let's be honest, is a pretty classy way to be remembered. But why was he remembered so reverently when so many other mythic figures faded into obscurity? Maybe it's because Chiron represents a different kind of power, not lightning bolts or bloodshed, but patience, dedication, the long, quiet work of helping someone become who they're meant to be. You start to see that the real magic of Chiron's myth isn't in the bow, the healing, or the constellation. It's in the influence. You don't get parades for shaping futures. No singing bards for tending the wounds of reckless heroes. But somehow, Chiron still got written into the stars, and that stardust isn't just metaphor. The constellation Centaurus, which still lights the southern skies, includes Alpha Centauri, the closest star system to Earth. It's like Chiron never really left, just moved slightly out of reach, watching quietly, like he always did. So here you are, listening in the hush, standing in the presence of a figure who never demanded the spotlight, but shaped the people who lived under it, who taught courage with a calm voice, healed wounds no one else could, and trotted away when it was time to let go. And you can't help but think, maybe the best teachers never stay in the center of the story. Maybe they're the ones who guide from the edge, then disappear when the student finally stands on their own. You linger a little longer at the mouth of Chiron's cave, almost expecting to hear hooves behind you or the rattle of a bronze goblet filled with mountain spring water and crushed herbs. But no, just the steady breeze and the memory of a centaur who taught legends how to sit still long enough to listen. Let's not pretend every one of Chiron's students graduated with honors. Some, like Heracles, turned their lessons into blunt instruments. Others, like Achilles, carried wisdom like a sidearm. Useful, but rarely their first instinct. That's the bittersweet part of being a mentor. You pour everything into someone, but what they do with it, that's their journey, not yours. Still, Chiron's legacy outlived every one of his pupils. His name kept popping up in writings long after the old myths had cooled. The Romans, ever the fans of a good mentor archetype, adopted Chiron too. They saw in him a stoic ideal, emotion tempered by reason, instinct guided by virtue. Kind of like a toga-wrapped Mr. Miyagi with hooves. Even during the Renaissance, when classical myths were getting dusted off and repainted in oil, Chiron made a comeback. Artists loved depicting him mid-lesson, pointing out stars to a young Achilles, or strumming a lyre while Jason balanced a sword on his knees. Philosophers mentioned him as an example of what it meant to educate not just the mind, but the soul. There's even a quirky scholarly theory that Chiron's story inspired the medieval concept of the wounded healer, the idea that those who suffer are uniquely positioned to help others heal. Today, psychologists still reference it. Imagine Chiron nodding sagely from a therapist's office, clipboard in hand. And how does that make you feel? Hercules. Historians still argue whether Chiron's myth is a leftover echo from a pre-Olympian worship system, a nature spirit turned noble over generations of storytelling, or whether he was just an ancient narrative device for explaining how a bunch of god kids didn't grow up totally feral. But either way, he sticks. Unlike most centaurs, who galloped into drunken disaster or served as metaphors for unchecked appetite, Chiron became the exception to every rule. A walking contradiction, half beast, all heart. The Greeks loved their irony, and here's where things get even more interesting. In astrology, yes, the thing your friend won't shut up about, Chiron is a minor planet discovered in 1977. Astronomers named it after, you guessed it, the Centaur. Its orbit? Wildly elliptical, weaving between Saturn and Uranus, as if it, too, can't quite decide where it belongs. Which, honestly, is so on brand for Chiron.in astrology. Chiron represents the wounded healer, the place in your chart that shows where you carry a deep hurt, but also where you can help others. Coincidence? Maybe, but it's eerie how well the myth lines up with that meaning. Even the stars seem to remember him not as a victim, but as a guide. The universe is sentimental like that. Back on Earth, you realize Chiron's cave isn't just a place in the mountains. It's wherever learning happens with kindness, wherever wisdom is shared without demand, wherever someone takes the time to guide instead of rule. And here's the soft twist you didn't expect. Maybe this story isn't about Chiron. Maybe it's about you. Because if someone like him could rise above his nature, could choose patience over power, healing over harm, well, what's stopping you? Maybe there's a little Chiron in you. Or maybe, one day, you'll be someone else's. You sit quietly now, letting the weight of it settle in, that rare, golden kind of silence that follows a finished story but still echoes with the steps that came before. You've walked through centuries of myth, seen empires rise through his pupils, and now, with the air a little cooler and the stars brighter overhead, you arrive at the end of Chiron's trail. But, of course, this isn't really an ending, because Chiron, the teacher of heroes, the soft-spoken legend, never really had one. His influence loops endlessly, like constellations wheeling overhead, always returning, always pointing somewhere. Even in modern literature, Chiron pops up. Maybe not in centaur form, but in the quiet mentors who pull struggling protagonists from the edge. Think Obi-Wan Kenobi with better posture, or Professor X minus the school funding. You know that archetype? The one who seems to know everything, but never tells you the answer outright. They just look at you, gently disappointed, and say, well, what do you think? That's Chiron. Even now, authors and creators across genres drop hints of him into their work. Whether it's in fantasy sagas, quiet indie dramas, or middle-grade novels filled with magical schools and chosen ones, Chiron's DNA runs through it all. The healer who teaches warriors. The warrior who chooses not to fight. Here's a fringe bit for you. There are small enclaves of modern pagans and spiritual groups who honor Chiron as a kind of archetypal figure of holistic knowledge. Not a deity, exactly, but an energy. A reminder that learning is sacred, that healing is layered, and that every wound tells a story worth listening to. Historians still argue whether Chiron was based on an older, pre-Hellenic figure, a deified healer or shaman absorbed into Greek myth, smoothed out by poets and painted with celestial awe. Some point to the cave as evidence of a real cult site. Others say it was pure narrative invention, a foil for all that chaotic centaur energy, too symmetrical to be real. But that's the beauty of myth, isn't it? It doesn't have to be real to be true. And in your own life, you've probably met someone like Chiron, a quiet influence, someone who showed you a better way, maybe without saying much, maybe without even knowing they did. Or maybe you are someone else's Chiron, guiding gently, patiently, never demanding credit. But that's how wisdom works. It doesn't shine like lightning. It glows like embers, warm and steady, easy to miss but impossible to forget. You walk away now from Mount Pelion, but not empty-handed. Chiron leaves you with something more precious than armor or prophecy, the reminder that gentleness can shape gods, and that teaching, true teaching, isn't about control. It's about belief, not in fate, but in growth. And just like that, the story tucks itself in. Now, take a deep breath. Let the coolness of the night wrap around you like a soft woolen cloak, heavy enough to hush the rest of the world. Picture yourself lying beneath that vast dome of stars, each one a spark of memory, of myth, of quiet wisdom. The silhouette of Centaurus arcs above you, limbs frozen in quiet stride, bow forever drawn, not in violence, but in graceful readiness. He doesn't chase. He doesn't conquer. He just watches, guiding, always watching. Let your thoughts wander gently, like the wind through the cypress trees on Pelion slopes. The kind of place where you could almost still hear the echo of hoofbeats, the rustle of scrolls, the gentle voice of a centaur humming to himself while grinding herbs by lamplight. There's no rush now. No battles to win. No riddles to solve. Only stillness. Let it wash over you. The knowledge that learning isn't a sprint, that healing doesn't happen all at once, that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is pause, listen, be kind. And so, as the last embers of Chiron's tale glow soft and low, let your breath slow to match them. Gentle, easy, like the rhythm of a heart unburdened that you've walked beside legends tonight. And now, you deserve rest. Sleep well, traveler.